I take a small piece of some of that funky stuff. It's like this and like that and like this and it's like that and like this and like that and it's like this and like that and like this and Drake creep to the mic like a...
Place your votes below for yay.
Hey guys, what's up? Chad Wesley Smith here. I wanted to answer a couple questions that came through my Facebook page the other day. So if you haven't done that already, please go like Chad Wesley Smith on Facebook. My friends are all full, so if you want to stay up to date with my training events and stuff that are going on, please make sure to go and do that. So there were several questions about, how to use percentages in training, how to adjust percentages in training as you progress, when to move them up, maybe when to move them back. So I just kind of want to overall, talk about some general guidelines for percentage-based training. So first off, I write programs with percentages, and I talk about parameters for programming within the context of percentages. When I write my own program, I'm not going through and saying that this is my max. All right, so we need to do 60% this day and 62% on this day and so on and so forth. For myself, and again, this is for me personally, I'm taking what I want to do in the meet and then working backwards from there. I know that in the peaking cycle, let's say to squat 970 this last meet, I knew that during the peaking cycle, for me, that meant I was going to need to squat 905 to 925, that kind of range. And to be able to do that in the peaking cycle, that meant in the strength cycle, I was going to need to, probably do 805 to 825 for 3 or 4 reps. And to be able to do that in the hypertrophy cycle, I was going to need to probably do something in the high 600s to low 700s for 6 to 8 reps. And I could go through retroactively and do that math and see that it falls right in the ranges that I talk about in my hypertrophy block, strength block, and peaking block videos. But when I write a program out for people, I can't tell you through this video what you personally need to hit in the gym to hit this in the meet, because everyone's going to vary a little bit, and how they respond to the stimulus and how they respond to the energy of competition. So for that, I write percentages, or I write programs based on percentage guidelines. And I think the percentage guideline is the most important thing to understand. That percentages in a program are not hard and fast, and that if it says 75% and you do 76%, then you're going to get overtrained. Or if it says 75% and you do 74%, then you're not doing enough overload. It's not nearly that serious and that precise. So what I've been doing more and more frequently is giving percentage ranges in my program. So let's say if we were in a hypertrophy block on a low day, the low intensity day, I'd probably be giving 60 to 65% for sets of 10 to 12. And then the medium day, 65 to 70% for sets of 8 to 10. And then on the high day, 70 to 75% for sets of 6 to 8. And very often on that high day as well, I'll give the option, and sometimes on any of the days I'll give this option, would be to work up to a rep max. So on the high day, it would be like work up to a 6 to 8 rep max. Medium day, work up to an 8 to 10 rep max. Low day, work up to a 10 to 12 rep max. Basically just with the advice that I never want people to miss any reps. And if you are warming up and you feel really great, all right, then that's a day to go for a rep max, within that rep range. And if you warm up and the weights are feeling heavy, and it's going to be a day where you just kind of have to get the bare minimum done and just kind of grit through that tough work, then you might just go ahead and do straight across sets at the bottom end of that percentage range. It's kind of with every high day where either you go to the top end of the range or you go to a rep max, it's very likely that the next training day for that movement, you're probably going to need to go straight across sets at the bottom end of the range. With every peak, there's going to come a valley after that. So you guys can't look at these percentages as set in stone, hard and fast guidelines, because they're not. A percentage, it becomes a question of what are you even taking the percentage of? Is it off your competition max? Is it off your gym max? Is it off your competition goal? I would encourage most of you to take it off of a true gym max. So something at a fairly low arousal level, and that's done with very high quality technique where you're squatting to unquestionable depth, a good solid pause on the bench, solid lockout in the deadlift. Don't count, sloppy or borderline gym lifts as gym PRs, all right? that's just going to kind of get you into a habit of chasing that number and leading to further and further technical breakdowns. So even if we're looking at the percentage based off of a gym max, a true gym max, the percentages are really going to be more of a daily max guideline, but we're not going to take a daily max, to establish what our percentages are going to be based off of. We really just need to add like an element of RPE or some intuitive thinking and intuitive training to what we're doing. And I wish I could make a video to tell you guys how to train intuitively, and really the only thing I can say to that end is you need to go out and train for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and critically think about what you're doing and why you're doing it, and take ownership of what you're doing in your training. And I think that more and more high-level lifters, whether they say that they do percentage-based training or RPE or whatever it may be, are really doing more intuitive training in the same style that I'm picking my numbers for a training cycle to prepare for a meet. But as most training and the type of programs that I write are going to be, unless it says to go to a rep max, it's going to be kind of 8 or 9 RPE training. So you're doing 4 sets of 6, and maybe the first couple sets you feel like you could do 7 or 8, and the last set, 6 is the most that you could do, or maybe you could barely squeeze out a 7th. But in my type of programming and the way that I like to train, I like to be slightly submaximal, and save true 10 RPE work or true 100% max effort work for very few occasions in the gym, and then where it counts on the platform. So that's one reason too that I'm kind of hesitant to write RPE programs for people, especially less experienced lifters, because I think it's very difficult for a newer lifter to be able to accurately assess what their RPE is, because they're enthusiastic and they want to train hard and work hard, and that's great, and that's a great quality. But that enthusiasm, far too often I see leading people to call things 9 RPE that were really 10, or call something an 8 that was really a 9.5, and they end up doing too much overload in their training, and not being able to properly manage fatigue, and maybe building in some bad technical habits because they're going 1 rep or 2 reps too far in a set. So if you want to use percentage-based training and you want to adjust your percents as you go throughout the training, if a training cycle is going great and you come out of hypertrophy, of course you're not going to establish a new 1 rep max during a hypertrophy block. So as you move from hypertrophy to strength and strength to peaking, of course you're going to be getting stronger, especially more beginner and early intermediate lifters. You're going to be getting stronger during those early blocks of training. So as you make that transition, you get, I'm not going to say you should move it up by 10 pounds or 20 pounds, whatever. You really just have to feel what you're doing and know that most of the sets should be 8 to 9 RPE, for whatever the given percentages are. Maybe on a light day, they're going to could potentially be a 7 RPE, if you organize your training in the same way that I do. But I can't tell you how much stronger you will have gotten in a single training block, or multiple hypertrophy blocks or strength blocks, or however you organize your training. You just need to think critically and adjust intuitively as you move from block to block. And I think you'll always be a little bit better erring on the side of caution, all right? Because you can always add more weight later, but if you try and add too much, and then you just crush yourself in the first day of a training block or the first week of a training block, then you're going to kind of be playing catch up on the fatigue management the rest of the way. So again, think critically about what you're doing, take ownership over what you're doing, and don't treat these percentages as some kind of magic number, and think that if you don't do 73.2% for this set of 8 reps, then it's not going to work perfectly, because it's just not that precise of a science. And there's going to be ebbs and flows to how you feel in training, and you just adjust for those as you feel them. Another question I got was about peaking too early. All right, and there's really 2 main factors that could contribute to peaking too early in a training cycle. Maybe hitting your best lifts 3 or 4 weeks out rather than the day that it matters on the platform. And I've talked extensively about peaking before, so make sure to check out my video designing a peaking block. I'll put the link in the information down below. But the 2 big culprits of peaking too early are going to either be doing too much overload in terms of intensity, or doing not enough overload in terms of volume. So if you're doing too much overload, and those are going to kind of go hand in hand and reflect each other. So obviously if you're doing really high intensity work all the time, volume is going to have to be lower. Otherwise you're certainly going to, if both of them are high, you're definitely going to exceed your MRV, your maximum recoverable volume, and you could go into non-functional overreaching. And if you're really, really enthusiastic and great at ignoring the way that your body feels and just trying way too hard, then maybe you could go into some overtraining. But people who are doing too much overload in terms of intensity, that's going to be someone who always wants to hit a rep max every single time, whether that's 1 rep, 3 reps, 5. They're always training to failure, and that's just going to become too difficult to manage the fatigue aspects of it, and it's not going to, in all likelihood, not going to allow you to build up enough volume to properly set up the fitness fatigue relationship. So again, as I said, I've talked about peaking plenty, and make sure you go check out the peaking block video, and I'll talk a lot more about the fitness fatigue relationship in there. But if you're not doing enough volume, so you have insufficient overload because of a lack of volume in the early parts of your training cycle, the hypertrophy block, and then as well as in the strength blocks, that's going to lead you to not have a high enough fitness level that your fitness will decay too quickly as you get into a taper. So not doing enough volume could also be taking too long of a taper for what level of lifter you are. So the taper is going to be when we start to significantly cut down on volume and or intensity approaching a meet. And again, I talk in the peaking block video about how to assess how to assess the length of taper that you need, and it's talked about extensively in Scientific Principles of Strength Training. So if you're a beginner lifter but you're trying to taper the way an advanced lifter needs to, you're not going to have enough muscle mass and enough fitness built up to carry that through to the meet. So you might hit a great lift 3 weeks out and then start your taper, but it turns out that you're a 148-pound class lifter who's been training for 2 years. That's going to be a 3-week or a 2.5-week taper is going to be way too long for you. That's going to be for when you're a super heavyweight lifter who's been training for 15 years, and so you're going to decay your fitness too quickly, and you might end up with no fatigue at the meet, and that's great, but you might have no fitness to go along with it as well, which is not great. And then another thing that could lead to not training with enough volume is having too long of SRA curves. So basically waiting for full recovery of every system between overload hard training sessions, because the different physical characteristics like just muscular damage, tissue and joint integrity, joint and tendon integrity, those may recover faster than neural qualities. And then when you're in a hypertrophy block, you could potentially train more frequently than in a peaking block, because those physical qualities are going to recover and adapt faster than the neural qualities that you need in a peaking block. So if you're not training frequently enough in hypertrophy and strength, it's very likely that your volume isn't going to ever be high enough for you to raise your fitness to the necessary level to where you basically have accumulated a sufficient amount of fatigue to where you can't necessarily hit those peak weights in the gym, and it isn't until that properly designed, proper length taper that you're able to keep that high fitness from the big volumes of work you've done, but now decay that fatigue through a deload week and light training sessions and some passive recovery methods. So that's kind of it as a general overview of percentage-based training, and some ideas about how to avoid peaking too early. So please make sure to subscribe to the channel. Go check Chad Wesley Smith and Juggernaut Training Systems out on Facebook, on Instagram at Juggernaut Train, at Chad Wesley Smith, and also please check out my new book, Juggernaut Training: A Thoughtful Pursuit of Strength, and hopefully you learned something. this next clip that you guys are going to take a look at is part of Dr. Quinn Hennock's presentation on creating a corrective program, so a corrective exercise program to improve movement, both from mobility and stability standpoint. And this was a presentation he gave at Become Unstoppable Seminar 4 right here at Juggernaut headquarters in Laguna Niguel, California. And this is going to be like a 5-minute clip of it. You can see the full 65-minute clip on Strong 360 at 360.jtsstrength.com. And also, if you're in the Los Angeles area, please come out on January 23rd at the JW Marriott in downtown Los Angeles. So the JW Marriott at LA Live, right across from the LA Convention Center where the LA Fit Expo will be going on. And Dr. Quinn and I are going to be doing a movement and strength seminar from 7 to 9 p.m. And I'll put the registration link for that below in the video info. Enjoy.
Okay, and as we're going through this, I'm going to be clear about what is fact based on the literature and what is my opinion. Okay, and unfortunately in this field, much of what we do is based on opinion, and that's why you get a lot of differing info. So I will just be very upfront about that. Chad. Okay, so a little bit about me. I went to undergraduate at Valparaiso University. If some of you guys are familiar with Bryce Drew and the Shot in 1996, that's Valpo. They also have a football team, believe it or not. So I played for them, a small D1 school. Took a year off or graduated, took a year and worked as a strength coach. Got tired of real life, and so I went back to PT school. I went to the University of Indianapolis. It's a 3-year program, graduated in 2013, and then have been competing in the sport, exclusively in the sport of weightlifting for going on 6 years now. So it's a hobby for me. I'm nothing like these guys here. Colin Burns does my torturing programming. And for me, I'm a guy that scratches and claws his way to national meets to lift in the D session and get outlifted by guys who are 3 weight classes below me. So it's a lot of fun. I can relate to you guys much more so than I can relate to them, and so we're all in the same boat. Okay, some objectives. As we go through this thing, I just want to speak a common language. And so as we talk about terms and concepts, you can look on the internet and probably find different definitions of what we're going to talk about. But just for the sake of our communication and what we do this weekend, we want to be on the same page with stuff. And then understand the mechanisms that actually govern movement. Okay, what is happening when I do this drill, or what's happening when I use this mobility implement? And that's really, really important when we talk about how to program that stuff. And then lastly, how to put it all together in kind of a framework that you can take to your athletes or to yourself to actually make a little corrective program for yourself. Okay, so movement has to be reflexive, and what we mean by that is that it should be automatic. I go back to an example of a basketball player who's shooting free throws. Game 7 of the NBA Finals, if he's thinking about his technique and his shooting stroke on the free throw line, he's probably going to miss, right? That work should have been done a long time ago. So movement is a skill, so a squat. The squatting pattern is a skill just like anything else that has to be honed and practiced for it to be automatic on game day. Game day being competition, being your heavy work sets and training, that stuff should be already dialed in. You shouldn't have to think about your patterning. And so we go from this concept of being consciously incompetent or unconsciously incompetent, so you're screwing up and you don't even know it. And then you go to conscious competence or incompetence where you're screwing up but at least you're aware of it, right? And that's where a coach comes in. And then you become consciously competent. You can do things correctly, but you really got to think about it. And that leads us into being unconsciously competent, which is the goal. If you've got 90%, 100%, 105% on your back, over your head, you're not thinking, your body's just reacting. Okay, so that's the goal here. Reverse double guns. So we want to think about when we learn movement as a skill, it's got to be in an environment that's less stressful than what you're going to be competing in. And that makes intuitive sense. Think about when we're back in school, you're going to study in an environment that's quiet and non-threatening, right? You don't learn new skills when you're anxious, right, or when you're stressed out. And so that's why we will kind of talk about programming the way that we do. All right, neutral spine, we hear about this a lot. We'll talk about it in terms of just the normal curves of somebody's spine, right? So in the neck, we want a cervical lordosis, or a little bit of an arch in the neck. In the thoracic spine, we actually have a kyphosis. So this is an important point. The thoracic spine is actually rounded naturally. It's supposed to be, okay? So we hear about demonizing kyphosis, a rounded upper back. We always want extension, extension, extension. We just understand it's actually supposed to be rounded. That's why our shoulder blades are curved inwards the way that they are, so they can slide around that rib cage, okay? And that's neutral in the sense of just the normal curves. And then in the lower back, we have a spine that's a little bit lordotic, okay? So another arch. So we have these curves that help to distribute force. When we go through specific drills or we talk about correcting movement, we tend to stay as neutral as possible, but just understand that in performance during game day, you're gonna have subtle deviations, okay? So if we have to lift weights, or we have to bench or squat or sprint or jump, we may need different positions than what is neutral. But if we can learn to stabilize that middle position, then we can learn how to deviate from it. The problem is not being able to find that from the beginning, okay? And that's what the drills that we'll go through are teaching tools to be able to find that.